Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a customer service representative and a customer who demands a full refund. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello and welcome to Under Pressure Enterprises Customer Service Department. This is Kelly. How may I help you?
Yes, I'm calling about one of your rice cookers I just purchased.
What seems to be the problem, sir?
Seems? There's no seeming about it. The blasted thing shoots hot steam all over the place, that's what. It nearly scalded my hand when I went to open it. Why, it could have killed the cat or something. It could have exploded and killed my wife and me.
Sir, please calm down. As long as the steam escapes the cooker, it won't explode.
So you're telling me there's no problem? Are you calling me a liar?
Sir, no one is calling you a liar.
Yes, so I demand a full refund.
Under Pressure will be happy to refund your money, sir. Now, I just need some basic information.
Okay. Sorry, I do tend to get a little hot under the collar. My wife tells me to slow down. So, what do you need to know?
Sir, don't worry. I just need to ask you the model number of the cooker.
Where are my glasses? Here. Let's see. It's R242.
R242. Okay. And how much did you pay for the product?
£89.99. It was on sale, I guess I should tell you.
Thank you, that's honest of you. Now, where did you buy the cooker? Which store and which branch?
At that big Electric Life appliance store downtown.
The city centre branch?
That's the one.
And you say the problem is that the steam escapes?
Yes, it does.
No problem, sir. If there's steam escaping, clearly the cooker is broken or defective. So we have an R242 cooker with an escaping steam problem. It was bought from Electric Life City Centre branch for $89.99. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Oh, I nearly forgot. When did you buy the cooker?
Just as soon as my wife got the crazy idea she'll live longer if she stops eating good English food, roast beef and mash. No, all she says she wants is rice and vegetables and sauces you'd not soak your feet in.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Sir, when did you buy it?
Oh, there I go again. Let's see. We bought it just 6 months ago. We hardly use it either. But 6 months? Is that too long? I mean, for the warranty?
Very well. That's well within the warranty period. Now, what's your name and address?
Name and address? What for?
Sir, it is company policy. If you want your money, you must inform me.
Money, you say? Oh, my name is Herbert Hewitt, and my address is 84 Park Road.
Is that here in Coventry?
Yes, the postal code is B0241DJ. But I don't think sending things in the mail is very secure or very efficient. I mean...
Don't worry, Mr. Hewitt, don't worry. We can credit the money to your credit card. You do have one, don't you?
Yes, that's how we paid for the cooker.
Oh, yes. We still have the number on the computer. I only need to ask your card's expiry date.
I'm afraid I never give that sort of information out. I mean, once you have that, Anyone could go charging things and—
Sir, I said your expiry date, not your card's password.
Oh, yes. Foolish me. Of course, you didn't say password. Let's see. That will be April 2008.
April 2008. Very well. Your card still has nearly 2 months left to go. We'll get that refund right to you, probably by 5 o'clock this evening.
You had better. If I don't get my money— Wait. Yes, I know I'm losing my temper again. I really am sorry. I haven't had my medicine today.
And, sir, just one more question for our records. How often do you go shopping at the city centre branch?
Oh, well, it's hard to say. I suppose maybe once a month. But I can tell you this. If I don't get my refund, I'll never shop there again.
Oh, I think it's time to start looking for another job.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a talk about the history of a poetry award. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 11 to 15.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this year's award ceremony for the Antonia Watson Memorial Poetry Award. As with previous years, the competition has been particularly fierce and we received numerous excellent entries, so it's an incredible achievement for our 3 finalists who are sitting here amongst you, and we should congratulate them all. However, as with every competition, there can unfortunately only be one winner, and we will be announcing them shortly. Before we do, though, a few words about the award itself. As most of you know, the Antonia Watson Memorial Poetry Award has been presented annually since 2010 and was presented biannually for 2 more competitions prior, once in 2008 and once in 2006. It is entirely funded by Antonia Watson's very generous parents, who offer £1,500 to the author of the best poem on a topic announced at each previous award ceremony, as well as £500 to the first runner-up and £250 to the second, bringing the total up to £2,250. Now, a few words on Antonia Watson herself, without whom none of us would be standing here today. I briefly knew Antonia while at university, where we were flatmates for a year, and I'm afraid that any speech I give will not be able to do her justice, as she was the kindest, sweetest person I've ever met. Thankfully, this part of my speech was written with the assistance of one of her siblings, Thomas Watson, who was not only her brother, but also her best friend. Antonia was born in Slayford, Lincolnshire, in December 1986. From a very young age, she displayed an inquisitive and creative nature, matched in volume only by the gentle kindness of her spirit. She wrote her first poem, named Love Barks, about the death of her dog at the age of 10. This was also her first poem to be published at her school's newspaper, just 2 months after another of her poems, Be Kind, won the 1996 Triad Children's Writing Competition and was published in the competition's anthology. While her early forays into poetry were crowned with impressive success, Antonia unfortunately ceased to write for a few years following the death of her very dear grandfather, Peter William Watson, in 1999.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 16 to 20.
While her early forays into poetry were crowned with impressive success, Antonia unfortunately ceased to write for a few years following the death of her very dear grandfather, Peter William Watson, in 1999. Despite her writer's block, however, her artistic nature didn't lie dormant during the next 4 years. She had an active role in various theatre plays, and she also ventured into painting. A few of the plays are available on the internet, and you can find several of her self-portraits on our website, and you can see for yourself how impressive they are. But poetry, of course, remained her passion even then, which is why in 2003 she resumed writing, and her next poem, The War on Both Sides, was published in her college's journal. At the age of 18, Antonia moved to Sheffield to study English literature at the University of Sheffield. This is where she and I met, spending a whole year in adjacent rooms in a flat in central Sheffield. This is also where I met her good-natured, generous parents, Mr. and Mrs. Watson, who came to visit her regularly and always treated me like a daughter as well. Antonia and I grew very close during that period, and while we ran in different circles, we always found time for each other every week. Antonia self-published one collection of poems in August 2005. It was named Burning Stars, after the poem on page 16, which is also the date of her birthday. It was an immediate success amongst her peers at the University of Sheffield, and it was so cherished by her English literature classmates specifically that it had attracted the attention of one of her lecturers, who put her in touch with a literary agent. She had been due to begin working on her second collection right before her tragic passing in a car accident just 5 days before her 19th birthday in December 2005. Antonia was always interested in societal shifts and how they affect humanity as well as the environment, and this award was designed to reflect her faith that regardless of what we do, we are all inherently good. With this in mind, all of the topics this competition has dealt with have been about the potential and the positive side of humanity, such as this year's Young Love theme or last year's Inner Power theme. We've had poems about personal strength, about immigration, about gender equality and peaceful protest. And hopefully in 12 months, the poems we'll be awarding will be just as inspiring with the topic of poverty. I know Antonia would be really proud of what her parents and what all of you together have achieved. So, finally, let's get on with the actual award. As I said before, it's been a fierce competition this year, and with more than 5,000 entries, it was quite the task for our 3 judges to cut them down to just 3. But our 3 finalists definitely deserve to be here, and without further ado, I would like to...
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between a student called Mary and her tutor, Mr. Hadstone. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, Mr. Hadstone. Is this the right time for our meeting?
Yes, it is. Thanks for coming in at such a late hour, Mary. I know you've had a busy day studying and will be keen to get home. And thanks for volunteering to run this project. It's going to help you develop and practice skills needed by teachers today. Field trips are getting more and more a part of school life. So as a student of education, it'll be wonderful training for you. It's really a great opportunity.
We did loads of field trips at school, so I've got a good idea of what sort of things we could do.
I expect so. But we're here to go through the basics of planning one, and the trip leader carries a load of responsibility. Right now, you're focusing on activities, but your main job is to consider the dangers and come up with ways of countering or avoiding them. There are lots of government regulations you won't have been aware of on your school trips, but they're just a guideline for your own planning. Some of those school trips you went on would have been pretty adventurous, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and your plan needs to be tailored to the kind of trip you're doing. On a well-planned and successfully led adventure trip, we don't often hear of problems, even though sometimes there's bad weather, for example, that a school party has managed to combat. That's because the leader created a well-thought-out hazard management plan.
Ah, I thought I'd just be taking my mates out on a trek. Now it's all paperwork.
Yes, well, that's why I called you in. We'll work on this together over the next few days. I just wanted to give you a heads up on what you'll need to think about. There are some aspects that every trip needs to consider. What do you think they might be?
Well, heavy rain or high winds, I guess, and any dangers in the terrain.
Yes, we call those the significant factors. And another important one is the makeup of your group. But you don't need to go overboard. There are some kinds of hazard that you won't need to think about at all. Things like hurricanes, earthquakes, radioactivity, or major diseases such as cancer. The official name for those is unlikely events, because they almost certainly won't happen.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Okay, so let's consider the hazards seen as most likely on a field trip into the countryside. Weather causes real problems. Overexposure to the sun or the cold, even the wind, can have a big impact. And of course, the weather can change very suddenly and without warning.
Yes, people can get into trouble in the hills if they don't bring extra layers of clothes and a jacket, even if they start walking on a hot day. Oh, and a raincoat too, of course. What's next then?
Well, let's think about possible activities and what you might need.
Yes, okay. Well, for hiking, of course, we need a first aid kit. Oh, and a decent topographic map of the area. And we need to make sure that more than one person can read it. I've run into lots of difficulties in the past with people who can't identify even major features, like rivers. And some people have no idea about contour lines. And I suppose a compass, too.
You'd need to list those. Then there are things that might be obvious but must be written down and considered seriously. For example, if there's a possibility of falling more than 2.5 meters, that's considered life-threatening. And I'm sure you would be aware of problems near the sea, like tides or high waves. And the trouble you can get into where there's a possibility of an avalanche, or a mudslide, or a flash flood if you're anywhere near rivers.
Yes. Well, I was thinking of an adventurous route for this trip. You know, that's always more fun. And it's such a cool feeling when you've achieved something really difficult.
Yes, okay, but then you need to consider who's going to be in your party. don't go and plan things that are beyond the reach of most people, or you're asking for trouble. You need to take into account the physical strength and experience of the party as a whole. When you make your groups, make sure there's at least one person in each one who's been hiking a few times before.
Wow! There's a lot to write down, isn't there? I'm really keen to get started now.
Well, good, because there's a lot more detail to consider. For now, I'll just mention 2 more of the common hazards for high school trips in particular.
Yes?
The Ministry of Education website says don't use inexperienced volunteers, and don't allow student drivers to bring their own cars, or to drive anyone else's car for that matter.
Well, now I really have something to think about. Thanks, Mr. Headstone.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a talk by a financial advisor about debt. First, you will have half a minute to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully to the talk and answer questions 31 to 40.
Welcome to today's public lecture on the topic of personal debt. I'm Ray Goodman from the Community Debt Centre, and I'd like to present to you today the second part of our 3-lecture series. Today we're going to look at how debt affects our lives. Debt is nothing new. It's found throughout human history and in every society. Many people know what it feels like to be in debt. Those of you who have bought a house will probably have a mortgage. Perhaps you've borrowed money from family or friends or got a loan for a car. Debt can sometimes be a way of juggling financial commitments and of paying in advance for things that you really need. For everyday living, you might not earn enough money from your job to pay for all the things that you need. You may require a little extra money in the form of credit cards. But debt has a darker side. Imagine how you would feel if you were deeply in debt and unable to repay what you owed. The consequences for many people can be disastrous. Today, people in the richer countries of the world live in a society where credit is easily accessible. Banks, building societies and credit card companies often encourage people to take out loans. They then make money by charging interest. For very low income earners, borrowing from a bank can be impossible. Instead, they are forced to take out a much higher interest loan from a private lender. They soon find that despite cutting back on many essentials, they are unable to keep up with these repayments. They are forced to take out another loan and find themselves plunging deeper and deeper into debt. People can find themselves with growing debts if they are unable to repay interest. This may be because of a sudden life-changing event, such as a business failure or losing a job. But for many households, debt is a means of survival. In developing countries, people borrow a tiny sum of money from a local landowner, for example, to pay for medical treatment. They agree that a child would work as a full-time servant to repay the debt, and that child becomes a bonded labourer. But since they are never paid, there is no hope of clearing the debt. Their life is ruled by fear. With no money, education or experience of life, it is impossible for them to escape. Today, debt bondage is a major form of slavery. As you can see, debt affects everyone all over the world to varying degrees. I hope the information I have presented to you today will make you think twice about getting into spiralling debt. Of course, if you are already finding yourself in financial difficulties, please make an appointment to see one of our helpful staff members after this talk. Thank you.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to your Ielts listening answer sheet.